Would anybody like to ask any questions to Alice?
Yeah.
Nope. Couple.
I was just wondering, because you do so many things, how is it possible to spread yourself so broadly, and you're obviously successful in doing it? Have you got a key to success in all those different areas?
I think, to be honest, I'm probably crazy for doing so many things. And my mind's constantly going. And that's one thing that I do struggle with, is actually turning off and not thinking about stuff. I'm constantly thinking, and I'm not saying that's necessarily a good thing, but, I think I spent a long time kind of branding the photography thing, that it kind of spread out to be able to do all those other things, that people started coming to me, not necessarily because they liked my work, but maybe because they liked me or what I was saying or what I was about. So it's meant that I've been able to do other things. So, yeah, doing video work or art directing or music or DJing or anything. It's kind of like, once you have that kind of, I have an aesthetic that goes with the photography, and that's kind of part of me. So that can spread out to so many different mediums. I guess I don't know what the key to success is, other than just loving what you do and being able to keep going and not lose faith, and not letting people that say no to you stop you doing it. Because at the end of the day, within the creative industry, it's all subjective anyway. So I've had loads of people say that they hate my work. I've had loads of people that say love it. So if you like what you're doing and you're keeping it true to you, then that's the main thing.
Related to that then, how does it work? Do you brand yourself differently for each bit you're doing, or is it all Alice and then Alice doing this and Alice doing that?
Yeah, I guess kind of. I think, especially in this kind of world, people want to buy into something, and I think, we live in a world where it's instead of a supermodel on the front cover, you've got a celebrity. And I'm not saying I'm a celebrity, but people want to buy into a name and a brand. So I think it's, I think no matter what I'm doing, it's kind of, I always bring the same kind of elements to it. So yeah.
Okay, I think was there a guy here asked a question?
I know you do quite a lot of things, but the creative industry is such that you always find yourself having new interests and seeing things that you think, wow, that's cool, I identify with that. And so bearing that in mind, are there more things that you want to get involved with, or that you've looked at and you've been like, I need to jump on this because this is where it needs to be, this is where my movement needs to go, sort of thing?
Yeah, I guess, that's why, I've started having a band. So we just had our first gig, supporting Brooke Candy in quite a big venue in London, and I think I'm very much I just want to do everything. So I quite like to be a midwife. So it's kind of I kind of just want to do everything. So yeah.
Have you always been like that as a person? Have you always been kind of that?
I think so. I think, growing up, I was at a performing arts school in high school, and I kind of had this idea that I wanted to be a pop star. So maybe I'm yeah, it can happen. So I'm yeah. I'd really love to do more directing films. That's kind of where I'm kind of going. I think with me, I'm very much I want to do everything, and I think at some point you have to be I can't physically do everything. I'm better off getting the people that are right for that job than me being okay, I'm going to do everything. So I really enjoy directing, so I think that's kind of where I want to go in terms of film work. And yeah, I guess, I certainly haven't made it in terms of for me, so the bar is still way high that I need to get to for me. So I think it's I just enjoy being given a brief and having to think, what can the end product be, kind of thing. So I just enjoy being creative, and I quite like actually doing the accounts. Just a bit weird.
You said that you lecture sometimes.
Yeah.
What subjects do you lecture?
A lot of times it's kind of been doing similar thing today, which is kind of talk about how how you can go from being in a kind of student environment to then actually making it into a real life environment. But yeah, I mean, I've lectured at Salford Uni, lectured at Birmingham, I lecture in London, and generally it's to kind of like fashion students or photography students, so that's generally like where I go. It varies, like obviously sometimes I've done ones where I've actually been teaching, so we kind of like get a bit more involved, which I prefer because it's a bit more enjoyable, but yeah, so I do a bit of everything.
And where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
My name in lights, obviously. I think it's just like constantly I want to push myself, and ideally I want to travel the world more. And I mean, I've been lucky enough that I've had jobs that have taken me to Paris and New York already, and I'm quite like to be going even further afield, and hopefully get to a point where we can open like a flagship store in London and stuff like that. You know, big dreams, but it's all possible.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
I don't talking about it. Like you were saying before, you didn't go to university or anything and like study fashion. Like, what sort of process do you use to get your ideas onto paper to actually?
How do I? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, I don't know, they just kind of come in my head. I think like a lot of time, like, a lot of my work has been based on like characters, and I think I've always kind of, I remember like one tutor saying to me that you never want to be a copy of someone else. Like, there's no point being a watered down version of someone that's better than you. So I've always kind of thought, stay true to like what I know. And what I know is like characters growing up in Bradford, like that I was surrounded by. And yeah, so I've kind of always like drawn from things like that. So like, I mean, in terms of like the clothing side, I mean, the last collection we just did was called Believe, and it was all about the empowerment of knowledge and business and learning, and like, again, that kind of drew from like what my granddad was saying, which is like how like you should be a student for life. You should never stop learning. You can learn from anyone, and I think that's quite a powerful thing. So I guess coming from that, and then just kind of taking elements from different bits that I saw that interest me, and kind of bringing that together to create a 3D thing was kind of. So it's more than just me being like, I want to make a pretty dress, like. So yeah, and I guess it's kind of like the same like process for anything. So I've always been very much like, I don't want to just do like fashion photography. Like for me, like a pretty girl in a pretty dress is like the most pointless thing. And especially now in like printed editorial and stuff like that, people, you know, it's a struggle for people to want to buy a magazine. If I'm going to buy a magazine, I want to buy something that's I want to keep and that's interesting and tells me something. So I've always been like, it didn't matter whether I was doing a portrait or a fashion spread, I wanted to do say something. So I've always kind of like started from that point, and then everything kind of came together.
And how did you like make editors and picture editors and fashion editors take notice? Or
I mean, obviously partly it was kind of, I started doing the stuff at Super, and I had people contacting me from that had seen me, or like, you know, just having the online presence, I think, was part of it. And then, yeah, just actually physically getting my portfolio printed and going to meet the people and being like, I really like your magazine, this is my work, could I do something for you? And it kind of just started from that.
And how did you go, because there's a lot of times you'll be doing free stuff for these magazines kind of thing, how did you then try and kind of like force up actually getting the money kind of thing? Was that a hard, painful process trying to?
Yeah, like I think especially at first, you like, when someone's like, asks you if you want to do something for a magazine, like, oh my God, I can't believe I've asked me, like, this is crazy. Like, you know, even now when I go into a shop and you see your work in the magazine, you're like, this is mental. But I think you just have to come to a point where you're like, you know, I'll only do something for free if I think it's going to benefit me. And I think you have to get to that point where it's like, you can't make a living off just doing everything for free for no gain.
Mhm.
And then I guess when people contact me, I'm always like, is there a budget? That's the question. Yeah.
Right, okay.